I think once we all know that the light is within us and how powerful we can be, it's like waking up again from that matrix and seeing that absolutely we can change the world.
Good evening. I'm so honored to be here tonight. My name is Rowena Chiu. I'm a Harvey Weinstein survivor and a Me Too activist and advocate. And I'm delighted to be here tonight to share a little bit about my story. When I was 24 years old in 1998, I was assaulted by Harvey Weinstein at the Venice Film Festival. Similar to Amanda, this started me on a route of trying to find justice for survivors of sexual assault and an entanglement with the legal industry that really held back the stories of young women, particularly those of Asian descent. Harvey Weinstein racialized his attack on me by saying that as a young woman of Chinese descent, I wouldn't speak out about what happened in that room, that Chinese women were discreet, and that he relied upon me and my discretion to never speak of what happened between us. I experienced 20 years of silence and 20 years of silencing by the legal industry, and eventually the New York Times came to my doorstep in 2019. And I was one of the original sources for the New York Times investigation into Harvey Weinstein, which was published in October 2019 and which kicked off the Me Too movement. And so I have a special affinity to Amanda's story. There are so many parallels. And so I'm thrilled and honored to be here tonight to introduce her. But before we get on to that, a few housekeeping reminders. Tonight's program is being recorded, so we kindly ask that you silence your cell phones for the duration of our program. In addition, if you have any questions for tonight's guest, please fill them out on the cards that were in your seats, or if you're joining us online, through YouTube. Before I get on to excitingly introducing Amanda, I want to mention that tonight's program is supported by the amazing Society of Heart's Delight, of which I am a member and also a supporter and advisor. We're so excited to welcome to the room tonight all of you who are here to hear Amanda speak. Society of Heart's Delight is a dynamic community dedicated to fostering meaningful connections across cultures, industries, and generations. Rooted in the rich history of Silicon Valley, once known as the Valley of Heart's Delight, the Society brings together thought leaders, creatives, and change makers to celebrate diversity, to champion local initiatives, and to inspire positive impact. Society of Heart's Delight is an all-immigrant, women-led organization with women's empowerment as one of our core values. And now on to introducing Amanda herself. Amanda is an activist, astronaut, and of course the author of Saving Five, a memoir of hope. As an undergraduate at Harvard University, Amanda was sexually assaulted and unfortunately experienced firsthand, as I did, our broken justice system. In 2014, she founded RISE to protect the civil rights of sexual assault and rape survivors. Through her advocacy, she led the groundbreaking Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act, which was signed into law by President Barack Obama in 2016. Additionally, Amanda has been outspoken about the rise of hate crimes against the AAPI community and also helped Stop Asian Hate. A Nobel Peace Prize nominee and Time Woman of the Year, Amanda will also become the first Vietnamese woman to go to space when she flies on an upcoming Blue Origin launch of the New Shepard rocket. Moderating tonight's event is Michelle Mao, host of The Michelle Mao Show and also Commonwealth Club World Affairs board member. And now I ask you to welcome to the stage both Amanda and Michelle with a huge round of applause.
Amanda, first and foremost, thank you to the moon and the stars and the exoplanets and back. Thank you for this book and for you and for telling your story on behalf of sexual assault survivors and all of us who believe in body autonomy. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for being here.
Yeah. Why don't we start with just a little bit of context and going back to family and, identifying as Vietnamese American.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of that is having very long hair, which I find very convenient at this moment with this mic. I'm actually growing out my hair to make a statement. One of the first things that astronauts experience is our zero-G indicator, which is something that lets us know that we've hit the Kármán line because it floats. And so undoubtedly, mine will be my hair. But I also have brought something that I wrote about. I will be bringing something that I wrote about. And it's a promise that I made to myself after I left the hospital. I wrote down, never, never, never give up in my journal. I tore it out and I stuck it to my laptop. And I looked at it every single day when I was determined to graduate college. I looked at it when I was fighting for my rights at Congress, and I will be looking at it when I float over Earth. And for me, it will be a really full circle moment.
Yeah.
Healing, but also one that I hope a lot of survivors will share. But to answer your question about identity, I think that for me, growing up as Vietnamese American meant, especially in Corona, California, which back then, the demographics have changed, but back then there are not that many Asian Americans in the schools. So I was one of few who had this hair, who looked like me. And I really had to, like so many people who grow up hyphenated in this country, explore what it means to be enough. Am I Vietnamese enough? Am I American enough? And I'll tell you actually that I was way more nervous about Vietnam, finding out that I'd be the first Vietnamese woman in space, than I am about blasting off in a rocket. And it's because I didn't know how they would accept me. Born here, this year is actually the 50th year of anniversary since the war, the Vietnam War, as they know it, the American War. And deliberately, I am partnering with the Vietnamese National Space Center to conduct an experiment. It's on plant pathology, so think Mark Watney. But I'm doing it because, in part, I want to show that science can be a tool of peace and reconciliation. And another part, it's to heal that identity, which is that it's okay to be both, even if these parts of me were once warring enemies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that, the significance of the first Vietnamese American Southeast Asian woman to go to space at the same time of the 50th year recognition, the fall of Saigon. So there's so many specials here and all the things that you have done. But talking about the memoir, Saving Five references the five of you, meaning you talk to your 5-year-old self, your 15-year-old self, your 22-year-old self, your 30-year-old self, and even your future 80-year-old self. Tell us why you wrote your memoir in this way.
Yeah, I wanted to explore what it means to never be alone, because that's one of the experiences I think a lot of survivors do have, feeling isolated when they, at different stages of their healing journey. I guess I'll just speak for myself because everybody's survivor story is different. But I did feel isolated. When my assault happened, it was before Me Too. It still is very stigmatic, and then it was stigmatic. And I really felt alone. After I left the hospital, I had never fully more understood the definition of lonely than I did then. And I wrote it in this way because I want people to know that we have so much resilience in us, and we have all these parts of ourselves that have developed survival skills. We're never truly alone because we can always look back within ourselves and find that courage. I actually wrote the book in that way. I know that this is like week 1 of the book, so people haven't had the chance to read it yet, but I'm really so excited when people have had the chance to read it because structurally, I wrote chapter 1 to be very significant. And when this is like not really a spoiler, so I'll say it, but you really don't understand its significance until the very end. And I wrote it that way as an Ouroboros so that the metaphor is that it was already inside you all along. You knew the answer all along.
Wow, so powerful because, not to spoil, but we are going to talk about a lot of things that will be a little bit of a spoiler alert. So if you don't have your book with you today for Amanda to sign, by the way, you can get the book right outside, and we're going to have this amazing reception that Rowena had talked about. You start the book out just by, even if you Google you look you up, we know your entire story. And that is what leads us to these big changes, the changes of this law. So many of us actually didn't really know until you really go through the process. I'll take us back to, right, you're at the hospital and you literally give us like where your readers are fly on the wall experience and going through this horrible thing with you. And you're there in the hospital, you notice that there aren't even enough seats for victims. Tell us, kind of a further explanation of, how this hits you and how this makes you feel, makes sense of like exactly how broken this whole thing is.
Yeah, the book has a lot of receipts in it, literally. I took primary sources because I wanted people to also feel the shock I had when I found out that my rape kit cost over $4,000, and exactly line by line, what exactly made it cost that much. And also when I found out that survivors who couldn't pay for their rape kit had creditors calling their home, and how unfair that was. Each of the rights that's in the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights has real life people whose lives were impacted or could have changed had these rights been in place. And so when I wrote that part, I specifically wanted to take somebody who hadn't experienced it to understand what it could feel like, but also for someone who had been in that experience to know that they're not alone. And I think stories and literature have this ability to create empathy. Stories are empathy machines. And so this book is really written for anyone who's had a dream that's been deferred, anyone who's had to sacrifice a part of themselves in order to survive. And for survivors, my hope is that through these pages, you'll find healing and parts of yourself that may not have been acknowledged before, and I want to say that it's valid. I will say that I wrote this book to be a literal journey of hope and healing, right? So half of the book is written as a traditional memoir. It's from the assault all the way to me passing a law and how I was able to pass it, all these like secret rules that I learned about in Congress. So if anyone's interested in how to pass a law, it will literally, it's in there.
Actually, I do want to talk about that because I think it's very timely, and I think that's part of the hope right now that so many of us are feeling like, okay, how do we do what you did, maybe for other issues that we care about,
I'm
right?
leaving Earth, so
But no, even Earth is in trouble, and like we kind of need you to go out there and like save it or something.
I'm on the first all-female crew because I'm leaving all men behind. No, I'm just kidding. No, we love men. Yeah. No, actually, I wrote a whole chapter. This book is a love letter to women, but there is a whole chapter in there that is dedicated to the love for men that I have in my life who didn't know how to deal with the news. and it examines like a prism all the different light angles in which men approached me after finding out that this had happened, and so in particular, of course, I think that allyship, or even, I mean, men can be survivors as well. All genders can be survivors, and I wrote it in particular to talk about my hero. Often in movies, heroes have this like epic, have action, whatever. But for me, heroism was in the aftermath of me trying to survive and going back to my dorm room where it happened, and I didn't know who to reach out to. And in that moment, I thought of all the names have been changed, so I have to remember their pseudonyms. I went talk to Alex. They chose their pseudonyms, by the way. So if you're like, this is a weird, they chose it. But Alex had experienced trauma in his life before. He was in a gang. He survived a drive-by shooting, and unfortunately, his friend died in his arms. And I remember thinking Alex would understand. He would know what to do. And so Alex came and helped me do my laundry and hugged me. And I wrote in there that, this time his arms did save his friend's life. It saved mine. And so heroism can be as little or as huge as just holding space for someone.
Yeah, to your point, right? Like all of us can be victims and survivors of sexual assault, and so it's genderless. But I think you're talking about, especially in this book here, you draw out the issues of rape culture, which leads us to a bunch of these policies that, unless you are a victim yourself and you go through it, you really don't know, you don't really understand, and that the system isn't necessarily designed to help you.
No. I like that laugh because it's definitely apropos.
Like you're the victim. Like
Yeah.
That's what you're
Totally.
supposed to do. You walk into a hospital, you call, talk to authorities. You think they're there to help you, but yeah. Anyway, you share.
Yeah, no. So one of the things that I discovered upon this journey of being a survivor is that though I cared about the issue before, I had no idea how Kafkaesque this horror game was to play, to navigate as a survivor in the system, right? It was, to me, like a Saw game when I found out that my evidence could be destroyed untested at 6 months. That justice depends on geography, that if I was raped in another state, that perhaps I would not have to fight for my evidence. That in New York, for instance, before my law passed there, they destroyed rape kits at 30 days, and untested. I felt that this was deeply unfair. And the conviction rate for rape is 1%. And so no wonder people don't report. And that's the conviction rate for those who do report. So out of 100 reports, 1 gets a conviction. And I remember that the legal professionals that talked to me were very well-intentioned. They wanted to give me a realistic idea of what it would be like to pursue justice. And they said to me, cases can take years. And during that time, it can be all-consuming. So is that something that you're prepared for, that you want to do? Even if you feel absolutely like you deserve justice, that's not actually the conversation that we want you to think about. It's more of, what are you willing to give up and for what? And for me, this book, and for so many survivors who don't see their justice in the criminal justice system, it really is about how we define justice for ourselves. And justice is different for different people. For me, it was making sure that no one had to go through what I had to go through. It was making sure that the U.S. government and the United Nations would change the law to be a little fairer.
Yeah. So some states 30 days, some states
Right.
6 months. The interesting thing about it all is, right, the statute of limitations. Actually, when you do have like 15 years, if
Right,
you-
in Massachusetts. Yeah.
in Massachusetts. But then you also illustrate here in the book, the difficulty of even getting to trial,
Yeah.
and the amount of time, the amount of money that you have to have money.
Yes,
We're going to go
that's
back
right.
to money.
Yeah.
You're the victim here, And unless you have all of that, I mean, who helps you? You really had to advocate for yourself, and not just advocate, but you had to make sacrifices. Like that sacrifice was, again, putting aside your dream of being an astronaut, and among other things, even the process of joining the CIA. Which, by the way, I'm glad you didn't join the CIA. I don't know where you'd be right now.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, when you, we're going to come back to passing the law, but just because we know that, Amanda, you did all this work and it did pass a law, tell us, right, like, did that help extend 6 months to a year, to 2 years? What does it mean that we have a Bill of Rights for sexual assault survivors?
Yeah, I mean, the federal law that I actually included in the book, at the end, the text of it, includes some really basic things. So the right to not have your evidence be destroyed and tested before the statute of limitations, the right to know what your rights are, the right to not have to pay for your evidence collection, the right to have access to your patient medical records, the right to have access to your police report. These are really common sense things, but they didn't exist before this law because, well, that's the importance of having rights codified. For instance, examining patients' rights, right? Technically, HIPAA is supposed to cover that, but why in this case it doesn't is because rape kits are evidence. So, in the crime and evidence collection of this particular type of crime, it is both life-saving medical attention and also evidence collection. And so the chain of custody then has a separate route. And there's all this legal gray area. And unless you have people at the drafting table who understand the community, you'll get these loopholes. And so, there's a famous quote, and I'm forgetting who said it, but it essentially goes, if you're not at the drafting table, you're what's on the menu. And I definitely felt that in this system.
Okay, now let's go back to how do you pass a law here in America? But you're not one of them. You're on the other side,
Yeah.
and you actually give us another chance at being the fly on the wall and watching this whole process happen a little bit. So maybe kind of walk us through it. Yes, we're giving away some spoiler alerts here, but that's the point. You have to pick up the book because it'll be Bible for the next time you want to get stuff done. I almost cursed.
You blackmail a senator. I'm just kidding. No.
Kind of. Sure.
They deserve it. So I learned that there are all these secret rules within Congress that you have to know that aren't taught to you. And that's why legislation takes so long to pass. It's usually like 10 to 15 years, multiple congressional cycles before any law is passed. And how are you supposed to win a game if you don't know the rules, right? So civics lesson, I don't know if anybody tried to come here for that, but here we go. The first secret rule.
Raise your hand if you want to know how to pass a law. Yeah.
Okay, yay!
Yep.
We're gonna go over this.
Okay.
Okay, so the first secret rule that I learned is that there are only 4 people within Congress that matter. Nobody else matters. And that is because of a authority called agenda setting authority. Right? It's actually a pet peeve of mine when people say, call your member of Congress, because it doesn't work. And that's because of these 4 people. So, what is agenda setting authority? It's the decision makers. If you think about like Schoolhouse Rock, the cartoon, when a bill gets introduced, it is assigned to a committee, right? So this bill, a lot of civil rights bills get assigned to judiciary. At that point, the only way to move it forward is through one person, and that person is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. Right? So there's 2 chambers, so it's the Senate chair and the House chair. These are the only 2 people that matter at this point because they have the full authority to put it onto the agenda to be voted. If they do not put it onto the agenda, it dies. 99% of bills die that way. So if you called your member of Congress and they weren't one of these 2 people, all they could do is go to one of those 2 people and be like, hey, I think that you should bring it up for a vote. But if you don't do that, then like, what's the point? So for us, being able to pressure that point was much more effective than trying to go and try to get as many people as possible. At that point, right, these two people, once they put it onto the agenda and it gets voted on, then it makes it to the floor, the Senate floor or the House floor. So at that point, it's either the Senate Majority Leader or the Speaker of the House who have the full authority to put it onto the agenda. If they don't, it dies. So the only 4 people that matter, really, in trying to push is these 4 people. And, you know, a lot of activists and organizers are often paraded around by politicians because they just don't know that these are the 4 people that you need to go. So, you know, sometimes it's like the Matrix, right? Like after you like take the pill and you see the real life. Now when I see, you know, press bills, which is politicians who get up and they line up, you know, trauma survivors, and they say like, I'm going to work on this. And I'm like, if you are not actually one of the 4, what are you doing? Because you're just trying to campaign on this issue. You can like see right through it immediately. So that's the first secret rule. The second rule is kind of controversial, but that's how it works. Just tell you how the sausage gets made. The second rule is that the lead sponsor of your bill must be a member of the majority party. Why is that, right? So it's because leadership, Speaker of the House, the chairs of each committee, is voted on, and whomever has won the majority of that chamber will vote for their party. The majority party has no incentive to give the minority party a win for any of their bills. So therefore, if you want your bill to pass, you must have the politician be a member of the majority party. Now, this is really in the weeds, but this is why you need to know the rules in order to win the game, right? So, I mean, like in Congress, sometimes, you know, they'll have like a quid pro quo where they will, you know, like have a minority bill lead sponsor. That's not the case, though. Like if you want it to pass, majority. And there's only one person who gets the credit within the National Archives for being the author of the bill, the politician that gets the lead sponsor position. You can have a bunch of co-sponsors. Co-sponsors really don't matter, right? It's that lead position that they fight over. And that person has to be a member of the majority party. So now, whenever I see politicians do their press bills, if you are not a member of the majority party and you're standing up there and you're saying you're the lead, you have like poisoned the well for this issue. You don't actually care about it getting passed. And again, it's like once you see it, you know, you can't unsee it. But that's, again, like oftentimes it's really difficult for activists to not know this, right? Because they see, like, let's say a famous politician here who's their hero, who is a member of the minority party. Are you willing to tell that famous person who is your hero, no, I need a member of the other party to be on it, which, like, I don't agree with most of the time because it will advance my community's rights, right? That's a really tough conversation to have. And oftentimes, you know, they're so caught up within this political game. I do believe that many politicians, when they run for office, did it genuinely because they care about issues. But somewhere along the way, the fundraising grip of the way that our politics runs makes them have this Faustian bargain for power, where, you know, you're just trying to churn out quips for what will raise campaign dollars instead of actually focused on governance, actually focused on what the community needs. But yeah, so these are some 2 rules that I learned, and as soon as you see it, you're able very quickly, by the way, to see which bills will pass, which won't, and also like what you need to do. The road is very clear, but it's a different thing doing good versus feeling good. It will not feel good to tell people within your own party, no, like we will not work with you because we know it will fail. Because the cost of that failure is, for me, 25 million rape survivors not getting rights, right? So it doesn't matter that this fits your campaign narrative. What's more important is that you're serving the community. But anyways, it's really difficult. So there you go. Those are 2 rules. Now you know how to pass a law.
Let's go out there and pass some laws. But this was really hard, though, because there were moments in time in which, well, I'm reading this, not another spoiler, but it is. I was so angry because you know, it's like we're feeling positive. There's hope. And, you know, yes, the hope is throughout the entire book, but I just kept feeling like these people are violating her again. Stop it.
Yeah.
And I wanted, you know, and the people I'm talking about in the elected leaders and such, these politicians, is the you know, doing this for the political points to the point where they were holding, you know, the entire campaign here hostage.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you stand up to that? And I mean, and still stay strong.
Right. I think the greatest lesson that I did learn from existing in this body while trying to push for our rights in these hallowed hallways of extraordinary power is that it is a power to be underestimated. So for the longest time, I had, and you know, this comes back to your identity question, which is how do I assimilate enough to be taken seriously? And I realized that I was never going to be able to be whatever it is that everyone's, you know, preconceived conception is of power. And so it's okay to be underestimated because that in itself is an extraordinary power. I didn't need to dress in the way that they wanted me to. I didn't need to show up in, you know, whatever way they wanted me to. I could show up authentically as me because all of our voices, our stories, the way that we perceive the world, that does matter. That is power in itself. You know, there was this one time where I was asked by the U.S. Senate, this is after I've passed these laws, to come and testify. And I was the only woman of color witness. I was a consensus witness by both parties. And when I went to the Senate, they did not believe that I was there to testify. And we were supposed to all go and meet with the senators beforehand, so I was barred from entering it. And in that moment, I had to choose whether or not I was going to fight and be that person to fight, or to like focus on my testimony, which was for the Violence Against Women Authorization Act, and with a lot of things on the line for that. And I chose to basically take the L, sit down and just think about my testimony. And I watched the other witnesses get escorted in front of me to the back room to meet with the senators. And it was a staffer, a counselor that recognized me, you know, and brought me back and apologized. And when we finished the testimony, she said, you know, what can I do to rectify this? And I said, give me my own hearing and let me choose my own witnesses. And I brought with me Terry Crews the next time, and nobody questioned that. But you know, it was a moment of my own form of justice to go back in that same room where I was denied. After I had served my country in that way, after I had already written these laws, I was invited by both parties. And you know, sometimes you will never be enough, but that's not on you, it's on other people. And it's okay to speak up, and it's also okay to know that the reason why anyone ever actually denies that is because you have inherent power, right? Like, in order for something to be actively pushed against, that must mean that that other thing is a threat. And so what is it with the gaslighting about women's bodies? What is it that is so inherent about us that makes it so threatening? And I think once we all know that the light is within us and how powerful we can be, it's like waking up again from that matrix and seeing that absolutely we can change the world. Oh, thanks.
Sorry, I'm just sometimes a little corny, and these things just really hit, you know. But we need you. We need this right now. By the way, we left out question cards for you, the audience. So if you have a question for Amanda, we are collecting these cards. So Amanda, I mean, so you pass a law, and I'm interested in hearing the responses from the thousands of people who were cheering you on, who were affected by this, but yeah, share with us what the response was like.
Yeah, after President Obama signed the first law, we heard from people all over the world who said, hey, I want to pass these rights as well. So I deferred my astronaut dreams again and started to work on the United Nations. It was really different. I will say that it took us 6 to 7 months to pass in the US Congress. It took me 6 years to pass at the United Nations. I feel like I was naive, but also that naivety really helped me to be like, yeah, we could do this again. It was easy. Democracy is not everywhere. Civil society is not seen the same. But I will say that the way in which civil society was treated, or well, how we experienced it from politicians at the state level, the federal level, repeated itself at the United Nations. But I did not write it. That's a story for another day. Those people are still very, very, very powerful. But we won. So 6 years later, the world voted on the first ever United Nations General Assembly resolution, and it passed.
Yay, yes.
Yay!
You'd mentioned at some point, civil rights and, going to space, astronauts, there's a connection here. And we know that you put the astronaut part aside for you to go be this activist, and thank you for that sacrifice. Is it now time for Amanda, the astronaut, or are these two the same thing and you'll still be the activist and the astronaut at the same time?
Yeah, civil rights astronaut. It's definitely going to be hand in hand. I will say, though, that when I made my decision to defer that dream, I met with a mentor of mine, Leland Melvin. Leland was in the NFL before he became an astronaut, so he was still all the dreams. And I told him about what had happened to me and how I wanted to go and put aside these dreams to be an activist. And he shared with me two things. One, which is that his mentor is Katherine Johnson. And Katherine's story is in Hidden Figures. She was a human calculator for the Apollo program. And as a Black woman, she was also fighting for her civil rights to be recognized. Her story in Hidden Figures talks about how civil rights and space go hand in hand. But Leland also shared with me something that was private then and is now public in his memoir, Chasing Space. And it is that he's also a rape survivor. And so to have this hero of mine who also, is a hero to so many people, so many men, say to me that he's also a survivor, was really impactful. And he said to me, go fight for our rights. Space is going to be there. It's going to be there long after you're gone. And so when you're ready, I will be here to welcome you back. And he was my first phone call when I got the news.
It's amazing. Yeah. There was a question from the audience that asked for you to talk about your mentor. So, but also Ella Baker. We didn't get a chance to
Ellen.
Ellen Baker. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna ask this question because you actually do include some statistics in the book about rape on college campuses. So can you talk a bit more about the physical and psychological training I'm sorry. Where did that question go?
I don't know.
How should colleges or universities approach educating and supporting students about rape, sexual assault? Should conversations start in high school or earlier?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is something that even high school students deal with, and so absolutely. I think the earlier the conversation, the better. And prevention is so important. One of my good friends, she just started a whole foundation. It's focused on prevention. And I think that the earlier, yes, it is stigmatic to talk about, but I think that the earlier we have these conversations, the better.
Okay, I'll go back to this question. Can you talk a bit more about the physical and psychological training you're doing for your Blue Origins adventure?
So one of the things that we had to do was get into a high G-force test, so get into a jet and pass the syllabus. And I will say that the taller you are, the more likely you are to faint because the blood drains from your brain faster. So as a short queen, I passed really well. It's great. Another test that we had to do was the hyperbaric chamber. So they gave us math problems while they lowered the oxygen level. And I actually thought that I was going to pass out first. So let me rewind. Before I was assigned to fly on this mission, I was accepted into this research institute, which trains scientist astronaut candidates for a whole variety of things. My track is bioastronautics, specifically for women's health. And every year they choose 8. So in that 8 internationally, and in this class of 8, I was actually the only one that was out of STEM. Everybody else was like an engineer, an oncologist, a cardiologist, a veterinarian, and I was an activist, my STEM 10 years ago. So I really felt like I had to put in the work. Also, we were all in this group chat, and I'm a night owl. They are all not. And so, like, in the morning at, like, 6 a.m., it'd be like, ding, 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 and they'd be like, I already did a marathon. Like, and I'm be like, just delete, So, great for you, Iman. It's okay. But he actually flew before me, and he is now an astronaut trainer, so he's going to be training me. It's very sweet. Anyways, so I chose to go. There's 2 bouts of classmates that were going through this hyperbaric chamber. I chose to go last because I was like, I don't want to pass out first. Turns out I broke the record, and people were like, so we're in this like glass cage, and we have the instructor has a oxygen mask on. We're all in there doing the problems, and people start like getting hypoxia symptoms, right? So, but I don't, and they were like, what's wrong with you? Turns out I have chronic bronchitis, and that has helped me in my life. So, this is what an astronaut looks like, peak physicality, chronic bronchitis. But fun stuff. I was one of the unfair things that they do, I get why they do it, but they test you for stress. So I had to relearn trigonometry on our final. We're not allowed to use calculators. We have to calculate the solar azimuth based on the shadow of the sun. If we land wrong, then you have to survive, whatever. But so I had pulled an all-nighter to study because I needed to relearn this stuff. And my high G-force test was going to be 2 days later. So I had calculated, I was like, all right, so I'm going to pull an all-nighter tonight so that next night I will have a good night's sleep. And so the next night I'll be ready, And they saw me come into class, just bug-eyed. And they were like, you are up now for the high G-force test. And I was like, yeah, that's so great. So I actually pulled from my skills as an activist, which is box breathing. The SEALs do it. It's a way to ground myself before I testified in the United States Congress in these moments. I used that same box breathing while I was in a jet. And that's what helped me. Also being short, but I like to think it's the breathing, meditation. And just random aside, if you're ever nauseous, alcohol wipes help you cut the nausea. And so I didn't have alcohol wipes then, but I imagined that, and that really helped.
I'm gonna have to slide you a little thing of the Thai menthol.
Oh yeah,
maybe I don't know. It doesn't have alcohol.
My
I don't
crewmates will
think,
need it.
Yeah. So you kind of, being short is an advantage.
Yes.
And,
actually, women's bodies are technically, in some studies, more suitable. So for space, there is actually a height limit because the capsule is only so tall. So I'll be doing 2 experiments in space. One is that plant pathology one I was talking about, and the other one is on menstruation. And the reason why I'm doing it is because of justice. So women were barred from being selected as astronauts at NASA early on because of menstruation. One of the reasons they used was menstruation, but they didn't have the data to back that up. So I'm going to be examining the effects of microgravity on different materials for menstruation. I'm going to be collecting that data to refute that. And it's a little justice in space.
Could you say, I was going to ask you to simplify that a little bit for simple people. So what does that collection of data look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically examining wound dressing. So the greater application is wound dressing. It's just that the specific application that I'm interested in is in menstruation. But for long space duration, I don't know if this is helpful. For long space duration missions, fortunately, we haven't had any surgery needed, and there needs to be a way to contain, a liquid blood. While if there's any injuries. And so I'm going to be looking at different materials. Actually, one of the materials, so again, I am the first Vietnamese woman. I'm also the first Southeast Asian woman to fly into space. So I did a tour of Southeast Asia and met with their space agencies. And so one of the materials that I'm looking at for wound dressing is from bamboo, and it's in partnership with the Philippine Space Agency.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. A last question about this whole prepping to go, to outer space. But what about like diet or something? Like, do you have to? Yeah.
Eat?
I mean, yes, you have to eat, but like certain things, or?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really is about finding what's good for core strength so that I don't pass out with the amount of G-forces that are there. But the training that I've had is agnostic of vehicle. So for instance, I will be doing a landing, but like one of the most difficult training modules that we did was for water egress. So like out in the open sea, we trained, and then we also trained in a big pool, a neutral buoyancy lab. That did take a lot of work. But one of the first things that they do in that module is they make you, in front of everyone, jump off of a very high diving board in front of your classmates. They're just like, go, do it, don't think about it, just go, So yeah, I actually didn't know if I would pass that. And there's also this part of the training where they blindfold you and they dunk you underwater, and you have to remember your training in order to escape from the situation that you're in. And my oxygen tank failed. I remember I took my first breath in and I was like, this is wrong. And then I tried taking another breath and I ran out of lung capacity. So in that moment, you click. You either fail or that you will go through, and you follow the training. And so I was able to follow the training, get out. And I remember looking at my instructor and I was like, hey, actually, the tank failed. And he was like, so what? I was like, did you do this on purpose? He was like, you passed, next, so. But no, I appreciate the situations they make you do here on Earth, so that you're prepared and you are calm. And that's you really don't know how you're going to react until you are there, until you're about to drown. Mm-hmm. And there are moments in which some of my class, some of them didn't pass, but they will hold you there. Because it's actually a disservice if they pull you out immediately, because they're giving you the ability to find that out about yourself.
Wow. I promised last question, I lied. But yeah, what's your biggest fear going out, to outer space? And are you scared at all? Or?
I am not. One of my crewmates is, and very publicly, very, very scared. And I'm like, please, it's gonna be okay. No. I think that for me, when I think about courage, I think about my mom and how she, as a boat refugee, went into the storm. Her boat was sinking. And so a larger boat was coming to save her. And in this tidal wave storm, they threw over one rope. And each person had to climb this rope from this sinking, fisherman boat to this bigger boat. And she said that if you were to let go of that rope, the sea would swallow you. And she said the only way that she was able to climb that was not by thinking about the entire rope, but by thinking about just the next pull and the next and the next. And so I think that bravery is something that you don't have to have for the entire journey, just enough courage for the next step and the next step. So what I told my crewmate is that, first of all, she's such an icon. So, she's done so many hard things before. But what I told her is that all of us will have a telemetry monitor, and for her just to look at that monitor as we're launching to space and just to think just the next 100 feet, the next 100 feet, and the next 100 feet until we have gotten to space and then we have landed back on Earth.
Yeah. Go back to questions from the audience. Coming from Boat People family, you had a chance to come back to refugee camp. What can you share about your feelings and emotions? Any statement or thoughts to young people having some background but have been struggling? Any tips or words of encouragement to them?
Yeah, I am so grateful that I was able to retrace my mother's boat refugee journey, my family's boat refugee journey, before the world knew, before it was announced that I would be flying. And I took shells from her refugee island, and I will be flying with those into space. We came on boats, and now we're on spaceships. So my hope is that it shows that no matter where you're from or who you are, if you really want to get somewhere and your dreams are big, that you can still achieve them. It can still happen, even if they're as wild as flying off this planet.
Thanks, Amanda, for being such a role model for us. What is your next endeavor after going to space? We're already talking about that.
Sleeping.
Yeah.
I will say, so the other half of the book is written in surrealism, and it traces the path of me going into my memory and meeting the past versions of myself, the 5-year-old, 15-year-old, 22-year-old. And in order for us to, the 5-year-old gets sick. And so in order for us to save 5, which is the name of the book, we have to go through the 5 stages of grief. Each stage has a realm and a realm keeper, and we have to pass a test that advances us all the way into acceptance and healing. And so when I gave my therapist a copy of this book, she said, "Amanda, that's so nice of you to write about a journey that you haven't gone on." It was savage. So yeah, that's what I'll be working on after I get back to Earth.
Well, this next question, it's a good one to follow up on that. Do you think that you'll write about your experiences in space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
When astronauts go to space, a lot of them experience what's called the overview effect. It's essentially an existential crisis. So when they see Earth, especially the Apollo astronauts, they experience wonder, but also terror, like awe in its full definition. And a lot of them leave as technical people, but return to Earth as humanitarians, just like profoundly moved to try to change the world, because they all see that we're all on this spaceship Earth together. Why are we fighting with each other? We're all in this, pale blue dot. And so, yeah, really looking forward to that, to being in an existential crisis.
We appreciate you so much. And that you find humor in some of this,
Yeah, or else what?
Yeah. Well,
What other option?
do you find yourself laughing by yourself a lot?
All the time. So yeah, not really a spoiler, I guess. If anyone's seen the movie Mad Max Furiosa, there's a scene in there where she just screams, but it cuts to silence. And when my first law passed, that's how I felt. It's the final scene in the book where I write about what it felt like to look across the reflection pool and see that, the United States Congress has passed it. And I never thought when I started that it would get that far. I did it because I was so mad. I was so enraged, and I did not know whether or not it would work. I would be trying, and I would die trying. I feel so grateful as an activist to have screamed and have the world listen, to have the law passed, to have it credited back to me, to see the movement grow, and to see its impact. Very, very few grassroots organizers and activists ever get to see that, or any one stage of that within their lifetime. So I'm truly so grateful. But when Congress passed it, I remember standing there, and I literally just was hysterical. I was both laughing and crying. It felt like a curse was breaking, and to me, I don't know if anybody else was seeing me, but they would have thought that I had lost my mind, because I was laughing by myself and also sobbing. It was both a very grounded experience, but also out-of-body experience. And that's probably what an existential crisis feels like.
You'll do it again.
Yeah, pretty soon.
And again. Since 50% of the population are women, would you take on activism to have a constitutional amendment to have 50% of lawmakers be women? And this question, by the way, as written, is from a man.
Quotas within, I think we have some governments, is it Rwanda, that is like that parity, gender parity? I don't know that first of all, that sounds great, but I don't know what the data has shown yet, but what I do know is that when women are at the negotiating table for peace and reconciliation, that the results have shown that women and children are not left behind in these processes, that communities do have their needs addressed. And so, obviously in international relations, we have hard power, we have soft power, we have smart power. But I do think that it is imperative that we continue to have all voices at the table and representing us. Because, again, it is because of our experiences that help draft and can reflect back the laws that reflect its own people. When we don't have that, that's how we have these loopholes in the beginning.
Do you have a favorite space movie or TV show?
Yeah, it's actually Gravity, but in that movie, she really struggles a lot, and I don't want to repeat that. I also, of course, love Interstellar.
I don't know why, but I just thought of Armageddon. But it could also be
maybe not that one.
No, not that one. It's only because Ben Affleck keeps, popping up on the gossip news these days. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to get into activism but has no experience or training in community organizing, such as law, political science, and so on?
Yeah, I think the greatest thing that I want to tell anyone is, one, your voice really does matter. It really does. But two, know exactly what it is that you're fighting for. Activism burnout is very real, and it happens in part because we're trying to solve something that can feel like there's no return on investment. So, for instance, for me, my slice of activism is defined very specifically by the metric of passing laws for these certain set of rights. And because it is defined very specifically, I do get to see movement in progress. That incremental progress is what allows me to have that hope every day. When I wake up right now, I don't feel hopeless, and that's because we are making progress on these specific things every single day. It sounds super bureaucratic and boring, but every Friday, our RISE team organizers report in from across the nation. And it's my favorite time of the week because they'll be like, from Alabama, I'm reporting in for this campaign, and this week we were able to win 3 more votes. And just hearing that, hope really is a renewable resource. And so, our Mississippi bill passed because we passed in Alabama and because those organizers worked together. And now we've passed in deep red states, in blue states, in purple states, and we've passed over 100 laws over the past 10 years. So even throughout the different administrations, we know that we will still hold the line and we will still be doing this work and that it produces results.
How do we sign up?
Yeah, risenow.us. There's actually two ways. So one is if people want to organize for the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights, which we still have to pass state by state because most rape cases are adjudicated in state courts. We also have an international campaign. So even though I passed at the United Nations a General Assembly resolution, the next step is a legally binding treaty for universal jurisdiction. Other crimes, drugs or torture or murder have universal jurisdiction, but rape doesn't. And so there are a lot of cases in which, when it happens, survivors just fall through the legal cracks. And then the second thing that we run is a school for activists. So we will give activists money, a grant, and we will help them through a 12-week program to write their first law. And so actually the first assignment that we give to activists is called Cringe Mountain. It's rejection therapy. And we ask people to go out and talk about what their dreams are to people who might not agree with them. And we want people to climb Cringe Mountain because it's often the cage of our own self-doubt that holds us back. And if we are just able to get through it and not care what other people who have smaller dreams than us say about our big dreams, then we will be able to achieve that. Every single successful person has had to climb Cringe Mountain when they have declared that they have dreams, that this is what they're going for, and other people have shot it down. But if we're able to climb it, then we will get to the other side. So Cringe Mountain, that's what you have to look forward to if you apply.
You realize that pretty much the entire country is going to be calling you now. I mean, in all seriousness.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's we really need this. We really need you. I'm sure of it that
People need themselves. I
yes.
think that's the really big thing is I wrote this book, but also I wrote and created this curriculum so that other people can take it. Because I think that the strength of a movement doesn't lie in its founder. It's when its founder is able to, it's when the movement is actually stronger with or without the founder.
I want to get through these questions. Believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure I get through everybody's questions. So we have someone here in the audience who's also writing a memoir, and they find it overwhelming. So how did you decide to write in present tense? How did the writing process go for you? Any advice or resources you can share with aspiring writers?
Yeah, I checked out to magical realism because it was hard. So it is very difficult. And I think that being able to narrow down what the structure of the story was, that took me 2 years, to figure out the structure. But it took me 4 months to write the book because once I had the structure down, it was really just filling in the blanks because we've lived this life, so we know where the story goes. For me, it was really helpful to read a lot of other memoirs. And I would do these writing exercises where I would take passages and I would analyze the texture and the rhythm of how other authors wrote, the metaphors they used, what stood out to me, breaking down sentences. I think it may be Vanity Fair. They have this series with movie directors where the director breaks down the scene, right, where they go and they're like, in this scene is that. So I would do that before writing. And it was very helpful. I also took a lot of master classes. I went on and I took one from Dan Brown, from Margaret Atwood, from Amy Tan, and it was really helpful. This is not a commercial for master class. It was very helpful though. And in fact, in my proposal, so obviously Dan Brown, none of these authors, Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club is pseudo, it's still fiction, but it's pseudo based on her, her lived experiences. But all these writers have skills that transfer into memoir writing. And I just really like reading Dan Brown books. So he has a very good graphs on suspense and pacing. So that was really helpful to learn about. But yeah, just read as much as you can. I wouldn't force yourself to read things that you don't want to. If I read a book and I could not get through, I would drop it. But I did read books over and over again that I felt were extraordinary. So for instance, Educated, Tara Westover, extraordinary. And actually, Tara really changed the entire trajectory of my book. Originally, I was not going to write anything about my childhood or anything about the surrealism lens. And I asked Tara, how did you write about people who hurt you and who are still living? And she said to me, Amanda, if I can forgive them for my childhood, then they can forgive me for writing about it. And that really changed the way that I was like, yeah, this is our lived experience. We lived through this. This is our truth. But being able to talk to these writers and just read about how they wrote it too was very, very helpful.
So we wind down here. Yes.
It's Tara.
Just a couple more questions for you. And this question here from the audience seems to be a central theme. Many people wanted to know this, but what has been the hardest part of your journey?
Raging out loud. I think I was so upset at the criminal justice system that if the law was able to speak, it would probably be like one of those Harry Potter howlers. It would just scream. But after passing, the 60th, 70th, 80th law, I think now it would be a chorus of justice. It was so deeply painful to be betrayed by the criminal justice system. But what I have found is that anger dissipates. It can fuel, but what's left is hope. And I found this I've talked about it publicly, but I read about it in the book. The first time that I talked about my assault to politicians, it was really rough. And I remember them saying things like, oh, this isn't going to help me get reelected. And I was like, wow, that is so honest. Thanks, but that's so awful. So I went home and I cried, and I was like, I just need somebody to tell me they love me. The next morning, as a pathological optimist, I went back to the United States Senate. And in my Uber ride there, the driver was kind of intimidating, didn't really talk to me, but he saw that I was going to the Senate, so he asked me why. And I told him. And this once intimidating man started crying, just tears welling in his eyes. And he looked at me, he said, my daughter was also raped. And what you went through, she went through too. And when he stopped the car, he said, can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting for my daughter. Has anyone told you that they love you today? I love you. And I'll never forget that dad. And so I think the greatest thing that I've learned is, yes, we may have pain, but our pain is so powerful that no one is invisible when we demand to be seen, and no one is powerless when we come together.
That's a mic drop moment. And I knew you were going to make me cry. I knew.
Sorry?
No, it's like, I'm just trying to tell you that we really needed this. And I don't know if, I'm sure of it, you didn't plan on releasing this book when some of us, or maybe a majority of us, are feeling like it's really crappy out there right now. I'm going to read just, a little thing here that caught my attention and just kept me on this book for like 2 hours straight. I finished the whole thing. And we would like for you to end on just expanding on this paragraph and the title of the book, which is A Memoir of Hope, right? And giving us a little bit of hope as we leave. You exist in a place of extraordinary pain, I tell her. We were outraged when it started. We wanted to burn the world, and we were ready to burn with it. The first law we passed carried the voice of a blood-curdling scream. But with each law and each moment that passes, that voice has changed. It carries a song today, a chorus of justice.
I wrote that. Yay! I love it when readers tell me now like what they like and what resonates with them, because I'm like, oh yeah, I did write that. No, my greatest hope is that, well, somebody asked me the other day, what are you most proud of? And it is being able to find stillness and healing. For me, I felt like my entire life has been like in front of a bullet train, just like speeding, and I'm about to get on a vehicle that will break the sound barrier, so this is really helpful. But I, for the first time in my life, have gotten to a place where I don't feel like I'm running anymore, and I can be still. And so I learned about a concept recently called glimmers, which is the opposite of triggers. It's things that spark joy, small things. And we're able to, if we choose, I guess in survival mode, we are programmed to find risks, right? What is making our safety at risk, negative things. But if we also deliberately choose to find things that spark joy, like how good your cup of tea tastes, or like how you like the way that a leaf is falling from the sky. All of these things can help us find that inner peace. And so for me, my greatest thing is to find those glimmers and to be at peace.
Amanda Nguyen, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for being a gift to the world and a gift to all of us. So pick up a copy if you don't have your Saving Five, A Memoir of Hope. And Amanda will be out in just a few to sign your books. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.